Hello everybody, it's Kara from Wild Book Garden, and today I am reflecting on my 2020 anticipated releases to see if I actually enjoyed them as much as I thought I would. I will link that original video down below if you would like to see me talk about the books or why I'm excited about them. Also, I know this is very late, but when I asked on Twitter, a good number of people seemed interested in me still doing this video, and I still think it's interesting, so hopefully you guys do too. And I also, like last time I did this, I'm not so much focusing on did I actually read most of my anticipated releases. I'm more interested in did I like the ones that I did choose to pick up, because I always talk about a lot of books I'm excited about, and I don't intend that to be a focus of my reading necessarily. I do like to read new releases, but I also really like backlist titles. Anyway, so let's get into these books. I will give kind of mini reviews where it applies, and there are some books on this list that I do not intend to read anymore. So I'm just going to go in the order I talked about them in that original video, and the first few actually came out near the later part of the year, but I talked about them at the beginning because we did not have a release date yet. The first of which is Rebel Rose by Emma Theriault. This is the first book in the Queen's Counsel series. I have not read this, but I'm still very excited about it, and it's a series of reimagined fairy tale retellings, and I don't really know too much about it other than that, but this is a Beauty and the Beast retelling. Just, you know, gorgeous cover. I am still excited to read that one. I realized I have so many books around me that I have no place to put the books I've already talked about, so that's gonna be interesting. Next is These Violent Delights by Chloe Gong. This is the first book in, I think, a duology. It's set in 1920s, I think, Shanghai, and it is a Romeo and Juliet retelling. And this one I actually took off my TBR, not because I think it's a bad book, but there were some specific things I heard about it, like the fact that there is a lot of medical gore, that just, I know that book is not for me. I do know people who really enjoyed it though, which is great, but I do not intend to read that one anymore. Next on the list was The Camelot Betrayal by Kiersten White. There's a bookmark in it because I'm actually hoping to read this one very, very soon, because I still have not read this. It was one of my most anticipated books last year, and here we are in June of the next year, and I have not picked this book up. I'm really excited though, and I think I've been putting off because I'm so excited and nervous, but I know a lot of people did not like this, the first book in the series, and I get why. I can see it being a very polarizing book, but I did really enjoy it, and this is an Arthurian legend retelling following Guinevere, but she's like a Guinevere imposter, and I just am really enjoying it. I think a lot of things about the writing and trope choices just are really clicking with me. Next on my list is Woven in Moonlight by Isabella Bañez, and I have not read this one, and I have also removed this one from my TBR. I was seeing a lot of reviews from people talking about the really problematic depiction of Indigenous people in this book. I think Isabella Bañez has a book coming out that is not connected to this series, so maybe I will still give her a chance. I just heard specifically about this series. Next is Throw Like a Girl by Sarah Henning, and I did enjoy this one. I actually read this one. This is a contemporary book, and it's a girl who ends up playing on the football team. She subs in for this guy because she's a softball player, but she gets kicked off for the season, and basically her and this guy work out a deal where she's going to take his spot temporarily on the football team because there's no rules against it, and a lot of her skill set is actually very applicable to football, which is cool. And I forget what he does in return. I think he's going to help her get back on the softball team. I liked a lot of things about this, and I gave it 3.75 stars. Next on the list, I had A Throne of Swans by Catherine and Elizabeth Corr. This is a fantasy novel that I don't know too much about still, but obviously I own it. I am really excited to read it. And this is one where I haven't heard a lot of people talk about it, but the people who have read it seem to really enjoy it. And I think that it's a fantasy novel that relates to bird magic or people turning into birds, which for some reason is just a trope that really interests me. So I do really want to read that one. Next was Dark and Deepest Red by Anna Marie McLemore. I did read this book. I loved this book. I gave it 4.5 stars. Anna Marie McLemore is one of my favorite authors, so that is no surprise. And this is a dual timeline story, which I don't often like, but Anna Marie McLemore pulled it off, unsurprisingly, and I just really enjoy their writing and their characterization and the themes of their stories, and this one was a dual timeline, and one of the timelines was set during the Dancing Plague in Strasbourg, France, so it's a historical plus magical realism book, and yes, really enjoyed it. I know a lot of people didn't seem to like that one as much, but I actually thought it was really good. Next on my list is The Will and the Wilds by Charlie N. Holmberg. This was another one that just sounded so up my alley, and then I started hearing really bad reviews for it, so I put off reading it. But recently, my friend Annalisa Ely, she mentioned really enjoying this one, and I think I'm going to like it too. She's kind of like reignited my excitement for it, so hoping to read that one this year. Next was The Mistwick School of Musicraft by Jessica Corey. This is a middle grade fantasy where music is magic. And I just really enjoyed this. I gave it 4 stars, and there is going to be a companion book, I think, or a sequel, which I'm really excited about and is very satisfying because I thought when I read this is such a cool concept and a cool world, and I feel like there could be more books set in this world, so I'm really excited we're getting one. Next is High Fire by Owen Colfer, and I think I even talked about when I mentioned this book in that anticipated releases video that mainly it's because I love the author. I wasn't quite sure how the story itself would work for me, and it turns out that was justified because I actually DNF'd this book. I have a recent DNS video that might be going up before this video. If it is, then I will link that down below. But yeah, I did not love this. The Artemis Fowl series is one of my favorite series I have ever read. It's a very important series to me, and I have enjoyed other things I've read by Owen Colfer, but this one didn't really land for me. I think there were some interesting ideas, there was some clever writing, but the premise just wasn't for me as much, and there was one character, like perspective character, who it was just like really disgusting to be in his head, and I just didn't want to do that anymore. This was originally a book I planned to come back to later, but I have since decided I don't actually want to come back to it later. Next is Yes, No, Maybe So by Aisha Saeed and Becky Albertalli, and I actually have a mini review video that includes this book. I will link that down below. I talk about 3 YA political contemporaries, and at the time I gave this one 4 stars. I have not changed that rating, but I do wonder if maybe it would be a little lower in hindsight, because there were some things I liked and some things that I did not enjoy so much. And that book also kind of helped me realize that I don't think Becky Albertalli's writing is for me. I do enjoy Aisha Saeed though, and like I said, I did enjoy that book. Next was A Mixture of Mischief by Ana Mariano. This is the 3rd and final book in the Love Sugar Magic series. I did read this one. I loved it. I gave it 5 stars. It's actually one of my favorite books that I read last year, which I think that video should finally be up at the time that I'm posting this one, so I will link that down below. But yeah, I love this. I also buddy read this with my friend Priscilla, and we really enjoyed that, and it was a really nice, just warm, cozy hug of a book. I think I've said that a few times, but especially last year, it was really nice to read this one. Next I have In the Shadow of the Sun by E.M. Castellan, and this is a historical fantasy book set during the time of the Sun King in France, or like inspired by that time, which is a time period that I can really enjoy in historical fantasy. Actually one of my favorite books is, I think, inspired by that. And this was pretty disappointing for me. I gave it 3 stars. It was very middle of the road. I liked the writing. I thought the setting and the magic was really interesting. And I actually really liked the character of the king, who, like, him and the main character had this really interesting dynamic. So I liked some things about it. I just didn't love some of the plot decisions, and I really didn't like the main romance. I know one of the things people were excited about when this was announced or when it was coming out is that there was a like a polyamorous relationship. I can't speak to that representation, but personally when I read the book, it felt more like the main character felt like she was being cheated on. And then like at the end she was just like, oh, it's fine, that's just the way it is. And that didn't really, again, I can't speak to that representation, but just reading that didn't quite sit right with me. Like they did not agree to this ahead of time. She did not know the kind of relationship that this person had. And then it kind of seems like it was just hand waved away. So I didn't like that either. And I really just didn't like the love interest. There are actually quite a few characters that I got the feeling we were really supposed to like, and I just didn't. And it was one of those cases where like the most interesting romantic scenes were happening with characters that you weren't supposed to like, I think. So yeah, I was disappointed in that one. I will not be continuing the series. I don't know how long the series is. And like I said, I gave it 3 stars. Next is Break the Fall by Jennifer Jacopelli. This is a really hard-hitting contemporary that deals with, I believe it deals with the sexual abuse during, like, that happened to the US women's gymnastics team. I'm sure it's happened before, but there was a particular incident that I think this book is partly inspired by, and I have not read this one yet, but I do own it. I just, it was hard to get to, and this is one of those books that's like, I'm not excited to read it. It's gonna be very heavy, but I anticipate it being a really great book. And then next is Of Curses and Kisses by Sandhya Menon. This is I think this is like a contemporary fantasy. I'm not actually sure. I have not read this one, but it's a Beauty and the Beast retelling, which I love. And I've heard like overall pretty good things about this. I don't think people loved this book, but I am still excited to read it. And then next I had The Kingdom of Back by Marie Lu. This is a historical fantasy following Nannerl, who is Mozart, like the famous composer's sister, who sadly we don't know very much about. because of sexism. And what we do know is that she was incredibly talented. She was an incredibly talented musician. Her brother even said that she was better than he was, but we don't have much information about her, and we have like none of her work surviving because women were forbidden to compose, and even the way that they were allowed to perform was very restricted. And so this is a historical fantasy reimagining of Nannerl's story, and I really loved this. I gave it 4 stars, and this is one that I feel like I've heard very bad reviews for primarily, and it is definitely an odd book. I think if you want a very clearly defined, like, this is the fantasy world and this is how the magic works and then this is the real world part, I think that's one of the reasons maybe people were disappointed, because it is very like soft focus fantasy. But I really enjoyed that aspect. I thought the antagonist of this book was a really interesting character. I really liked Nannerl. I just really felt for her, and I love the way this book dealt with that conflict of Nannerl loving her brother and being happy for his success, but then also like always feeling like, why does he get to have so much more than me when I'm just as good? I think it has a lot to say about misogyny and about women's abilities and talent, and the way that we control those and we prevent those from reaching their full potential. Yeah, so I know that a lot of people didn't like this, but I really did. The Midnight Lie by Marie Berkowski. I have not read this book, and I think technically I still have this on my Goodreads TBR. I don't know that I'm still gonna read it though. I've heard pretty mediocre to negative reviews, and I did really enjoy, like I really loved the first book in her other trilogy, The Winter's Curse, and I liked the second book, and then I found the third one a little disappointing, so I think I would still try things from her. Next was Anna K by Jenny Lee, and this is a contemporary reimagining of Anna Karenina by Tolstoy. I think I actually officially took this one off my TBR. I just don't think this is the kind of book for me. It gives me very like rich people problems vibes, and I just don't love reading about teenagers like doing drugs and like that kind of thing. So, and I think that's like a pretty significant element of the book. Next was The Triumphant Tale of Pippa North by Tamra Belts, and this one I have not read, but I do still want to read it. It's a fantasy book, and I think it's kind of like a take on fairy tales, but we're following like an ordinary person instead of like the chosen one, which I really love that in fantasy, so I do want to get to that one. I also had Night of the Dragon by Julie Kagawa. This is the third and final book in the Shadow of the Fox trilogy. I did read this one. I did really enjoy it. I gave it 4 stars, but in my series tag video I actually mentioned that this is a series that I think is larger or better than the sum of its parts. Like every book in the series I think I gave 4 stars, but as a whole I would give the series 5 stars. I just really think it's really well done. I happen to really like the character types. I really like the world. I found this a really powerful and emotional conclusion, and I did just really enjoy that. Next was Ghost Squad by Claribel A. Ortega, and I really enjoyed this. This is a middle grade fantasy that involves ghosts and like themes of family and also like history and kind of like learning and healing from the past. Also, I have to always give a shout out to Chunk on the cover because I love him. I love him so much. But yeah, that one was really good, and I gave it 4 stars. Next was A Field Guide to Getting Lost by Joy McCullough. This is a contemporary. Joy McCullough wrote Blood, Water, Paint, which is one of my favorite books probably ever. It was my favorite book the year that I read it, and I'm pretty much gonna read everything she ever writes. I'm not big on camping stories, which I think this one partly is, but I really trust her, so I'm gonna read it at some point. That's another one that I do actually own, but I don't really have it accessible right now, but I am gonna still read that. And next was The Silence of Bones by June Her. This is a historical mystery that I really, really enjoyed. I gave this one 4 stars, and it is set in the Joseon era of South Korea, or it was just Korea at that time, and I just thought this was such a compelling mystery. I also really liked the writing. I think the atmosphere is really good. I just think this is a really, really excellent novel, and I can't wait to read June Her's new release, which I own and I haven't gotten to yet. Next is The Life and Medieval Times of Kit Sweetly by Jamie Pacton. This is a contemporary, and we're following a girl who I think she's like working at a Renaissance fair or something, or she visits one, and she finds out that girls are not allowed to be knights, and she's like, that's BS. So she decides to become a knight, and like so she can perform as a knight in this Renaissance show or this Renaissance fair, and I still definitely want to read this one. I've heard pretty good reviews, but I have not read it yet. Next is Court of Lions by Sumaya Daoud, and this is the second book and the concluding book in the Mirage duology. I really enjoyed the first book. It's a really interesting blend of sci-fi fantasy, and I believe it is partly inspired by Morocco, so that is part of the setting, and I just really enjoyed the first one. I think it really went under the radar the year it came out, and I have heard mixed things about this sequel. I know a lot of people were disappointed in it, but I do know a couple people I follow who actually enjoyed it even more than the first book. So I'm still hopeful. Also, beautiful cover, and I'm very excited to get to that one as well. Next was A Place at the Table by Sadia Farouki and Laura Chaban. This is another one I own but don't have with me, but I am definitely excited to read that. It's a book about like the intersection of culture and food and family, and I just think I'm really going to enjoy that. Next is A Ceiling Made of Eggshells by Gail Carson Levine, and this is a historical fiction book, and it's set in Spain, and our main character is a young Jewish girl, and I think this is set at the time when Jewish people were actually being expelled from Spain, so I think it's going to deal with some really heavy topics. I am still definitely interested in reading this one, and I don't think Gail Carson Levine has done a historical fiction book before, so I'm really interested about that. I know there's also a big focus on the main character's relationship with her grandfather, so that sounds really good, and I definitely do want to read that one. Next is The Memory of Babble by Christelle Davot, translated by Hildegard Searle. I actually received this from the publisher in exchange for an honest review, and I will link that review down below. This is the third book in the Mere Visitor series, and it was my least favorite in the series so far, but it was still very good. I gave it 3.75 stars, and if you want more thoughts, again, check out that video. Next is The Jane Austen Society by Natalie Jenner. I'm really excited to read this one. I do not have it yet, and I have not read it yet, but this is I think it's set during World War II, and it's basically this group of women, I think they're all women, who have kind of a book club where they talk about Jane Austen, and it's about how Jane Austen can like help you through hard times. It's about finding community, it's about finding strength in each other during times of great suffering and stress, and I've heard overall very good things about this one, and I think I'm really going to like it, so yes, very excited about that one. Next is A Song of Wraiths and Ruin by Roseanne A. Brown. I am so angry at myself that I still haven't read this. I have several friends who really loved it, and people in general seem to be really loving this one. This is a West African inspired fantasy, and we're following two main characters, and I think they both have to kill the other person for like various plot reasons, but they end up having this really deep connection instead, and I've just heard really good things about it. I've heard that this book deals with mental health, and I really like that in fantasy books. I wish we had more of that in fantasy. Also, again, a gorgeous cover. Next is another one I am so frustrated with myself for not having read yet, and that is Where Dreams Descend by Janella Angeles. This is a Phantom of the Opera retelling. Phantom of the Opera is like one of my favorite things. Basically all its iterations I really enjoy for different reasons, and I'm so upset I haven't read this yet. It also has kind of like Moulin Rouge vibes, which like I'm into that idea, that aesthetic, even though I have never finished watching the movie, but I have heard very mixed things about it, but the good things I have heard are things I tend to like, so I'm still really excited for this one, and I keep repeating myself, but like so many beautiful covers. Next is Igniting Darkness by Robin Lefevers. This is the second book in a duology that is set in the same world as the His Fair Assassin trilogy. I've really enjoyed almost all of the books in that series, and I still have not read this one. I do want to mention that this duology, you definitely, in my opinion, I think you do need to read the trilogy before getting to this one, but I really enjoy that series overall, so I don't think it's a hardship. I do have a spoiler-free review on the first book in this duology, which I will link down below. Next is My Calamity Jane by Cynthia Han, Brody Ashton, and Jody Meadows. This is the third book in the the Lady Janies series, I think, which is basically about taking women's stories from history and giving them better endings and adding a little bit of fantasy. This one is on Calamity Jane, and I think Annie Oakley is in this book as well. Like, I don't think this book has gotten as many good reviews as the others in this series, but I'm still interested in it. I think it still sounds good. And I'm realizing that I can enjoy Western set books when there's like a mix of other genres or ideas. Next is a book that was very controversial when it was first announced, and that is Jo and Laurie by Margaret Stoll and Melissa de la Cruz. Like the rage, the rage from people, like the vitriolic hatred when this book was announced was just something to behold, because this is a retelling of Little Women, but Jo and Laurie actually have a romance together, and I'm on board for this. I have not read Little Women in a very long time, but one of the things I remember being like very disappointed in is I was not convinced by the romances, really like any of them in that book actually, in hindsight. So like, I'm open to this. I have really disliked the other things I've read by Melissa de la Cruz, so I'm a little nervous. But yeah, I am still excited to read this. I know that some people are very angry it exists, but like, I mean, that's what retellings are. Like, I understand not wanting to read one that retells something in a way that you're not interested in or that you don't like the idea, but like the actual like anger and disgust was pretty intense. Next was The Boundless by Anna Bright. This is the second book in the duology. The first book is The Beholder, and I have a spoiler-free review for that one, which I will link down below, which I really enjoyed. That's another one that I think got fairly mixed reviews, but I really enjoyed it. It's like a very kind of soft focus fantasy story. So this is another series where like, if you want like strongly defined fantasy aspects, probably not for you. but I really enjoyed it. And this second book I did read and I didn't like it quite as much as the first book though. I gave it 3.75 stars and there were still a lot of great things about it, but honestly, like the things that I didn't like were just personal preference. I did not like the way the romance turned out in this one. And I was also very disappointed because my favorite character from the first book was barely in this one, even though plot-wise, they should have been in this book a lot. So that was frustrating, but I do like that series. Next is Hood by Jenny Elder Moak. This is another one that was like one of my most anticipated releases and I still haven't read it. This is a Robin Hood retelling, as you can probably tell, and I am finding that I just really enjoy Robin Hood retellings. I think they're in that sweet spot for me where there are aspects of the story that I find really interesting, but I don't have like really strong opinions about what should happen in a retelling, because I read a lot of retellings and there are definitely stories where I have opinions about what should or shouldn't be changed or like what I'm open to changing. So I'm excited to get to that one. Next is I'll Be the One by Lila Lee, and I have not read this book, but I'm still really excited to. This is a contemporary, I think it's the first in a series actually. I'm following a girl who is plus sized and she gets a chance to be a K-pop star. Like she's I think in a competition and there's a romance, and I've just heard really good things and this sounds adorable, so I'm very excited for that one. Next is Haunted by the Sky by Tanaz Bathina. This is the first book in a fantasy series that I think is inspired by Mughal India. Another stunning cover. One of our main characters is a girl who is seeking revenge. She gets taken in by a group of, I think, warriors, or like maybe assassins, and so she's like learning from them and she wants to get revenge on the people who killed her family. And then the boy, I don't remember what he's doing. It also says that he becomes entangled in a mission of vengeance, and I just think this sounds like a really interesting like premise, and I think the world sounds really interesting. Next is Sisters of Sword and Song by Rebecca Ross. This is a standalone fantasy. I just really like the idea of the world and the like the pantheon of gods and goddesses in this sound really interesting. Also super strong sister relationship in this one, which I love. I've also heard there's like some really good romance in this book, and this is, I think did I mention that this is a standalone? Rebecca Ross is one of those authors where like I am so hyped about every single book of hers I've heard about, and I have not yet read any of them. And I think honestly part of the reason is because like I'm so sure I'm gonna love her books that I'm scared to find out I'm wrong. So that's my excuse for why I haven't read any of her books yet, despite the fact that I am like 95% sure I'm gonna love them. Especially that one. That one sounds really good. But yeah, I haven't read it. Next is Mexican Gothic by Silvia Moreno Garcia, and I really loved this. This was also one of my favorite books of the year, so clearly I thought this book was incredible. I did give it 5 stars, and I have a spoiler-free reasons to read video, which I will link it down below. This is a Gothic horror novel, and I just think the way that it uses horror to comment on things like eugenics and racism and colonization, I think all of that is just so smart and so well done. I love Noemi as a character. I think the atmosphere was good. I know that not everybody thought the atmosphere was well done, and I know not everyone thought the horror was scary. I did. But yeah, I just think this is a really incredible book and just another hit for Silvia Moreno Garcia for me. Next is The Forest of Stars by Heather Kastner, and I keep putting this book on TBRs and then not reading it because I have not read this one yet. And I really enjoyed The Bone Garden, and I really think I'm gonna enjoy this one, and I just have not read it. She has another book coming out this year that I'm also excited for. Why haven't I read this book? It's about a girl trying to find her father, I think, and she ends up getting a ticket to the mysterious carnival beneath the stars. And I just think the magic and the atmosphere and the setting sounds really great. Again, I really enjoyed the first book I read by this author, which is a different standalone, and I just think I'm really going to enjoy this, and I need to actually read it. Next is Star Daughter by Shweta Thakrar. This is a contemporary fantasy, and our main character is a girl who is half star, half human. And when there's a terrible accident, she has to go to the world of the stars and try and get help from her mother, who is a star, and from her family in order to save her father's life. But to do that, she has to compete in this competition there. And I liked this, but I didn't love this. I really loved Shweta Thakrar's short story in, I think it was 1,000 Beginnings and Endings. I loved that. So I was really excited for this book, and it was good for me. It wasn't great though. I think the romance was underdeveloped. Like the love interest for what an important character they were, I think was again very underdeveloped. There were some parts of the plot that I did enjoy, but some parts just felt pretty slow to me. So yeah, like I liked this, and I'm definitely excited for the other things by this author, but this was not like an absolute love for me, which was kind of disappointing because this was actually one of my most anticipated books, and I give it 3.5 stars, so still good. Next is The Other Side of the Sky by Amy Kaufman and Megan Spooner. I have not read this one. This is a combination sci-fi fantasy book. One of these characters is from more of a sci-fi world, and one of them is from more of a fantasy world, and I just think I'm going to really enjoy this. Also, there's a kitty on the cover, which I love. So yeah, I have really loved like basically like everything I've read from Megan Spooner. Megan Spooner, I think at this point I can safely call her one of my favorite authors, and I have less experience with Amy Kaufman, but I did really enjoy These Broken Stars trilogy, which these two authors co-wrote. So I am pretty confident that I'm going to really enjoy this one, especially because, as I said, I love Megan Spooner. And then finally, the last book I talked about in that video is Instant Karma by Marissa Meyer. I have not read this one either. I wish we could have ended on a high note, but I have not read this one. This is a contemporary with just a little bit of speculative element, because our main character is a girl who is like a real overachiever in school, and she gets the ability to like basically give people instant consequences. And I know a lot of people really, really didn't like this book, but I think I actually will. I just tend to really enjoy Marissa Meyer as a writer. I especially really like her characters and her character dynamics. I think she writes them really well. And I think a lot of the issue people had is that they really didn't like the female lead in this one. Like a lot of the complaints seemed to be that she was like too much of a perfectionist, and like that made her annoying, which like I can kind of relate to. So I think I probably will get along better with the female main character than others have. I'm also hoping the book kind of touches on like the ethics of like being able to decide what somebody should be punished for or with. And yeah, there's also some focus on the environment. I think the romance sounds really good. I'm like still hopeful about this one, even though I know a lot of people didn't like it. So those are all of the books that I had on that list. So again, keep in mind that I was not attempting to read every book on that list. I got more interested in, did I actually enjoy the ones I did read? And I also want to mention that for the books that ended up on my favorites list, I actually added an extra point because I think that is like extra good if I was excited about a book and it was not just one I loved, but it was a favorite. So of the 14 books that I did read from that list, the average rating was 4.16, which is fantastic. To compare that to the last time I did this video, which would be for my 2019 anticipated releases, of the 12 books I read for that one, it was a 3.96 average. So still really high, but I'm actually even, like, this is even better, which I'm really excited about. And also something that makes me feel a lot better, when I was looking at the stack of books to talk about, I'm like, I own so many of these that I have not read. And actually, when I counted it up, I think it was around like 16 or 17 books that I own from that list, but I have not read, which I still want to read those obviously, and I would have liked to have read more of them, but that was not nearly as bad as I thought it was going to be. So I'm feeling pretty good about that. Also, I definitely noticed that last year, as far as my book buying goes, I was definitely buying more new releases than I normally do. Like I bought fewer backlist books and more new release books when I was purchasing books last year. So maybe that also affected those numbers, but yeah, like actually not too bad. I'm doing great on the rating, and the part that I was actually very concerned about was how many I had not read but that I did own copies of. And even on that front, we're not doing that terrible. So this actually feels pretty good. Comment down below and let me know if you keep track of your anticipated releases at all. Do you feel like you've been doing pretty good at picking up ones that you actually enjoy? Let me know a book coming out this year that you're excited about. Let me know a book you were excited for last year that you did actually love, if any of those things apply. Yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you soon with another video, and I hope you love the next book you read. Bye!